In this video, we're going to create the JavaScript Ajax creation ability. So right here, when we click create, we'll type something in and it will insert it into the database. So make sure you have your database open, and I'm using HeidiSQL here. And let's go to the to-do table and the data tab. And right now it's empty, but we're going to get that populated. So the first thing is to make sure we have a controller that posts the data. So I'll open up API and I'll head over to create note. And we always want the user to be logged in, so we're going to put the code below here. And what we're going to do is a database query. So we'll start with result equals this DB insert. We're going to insert it into to do. And we'll make an array, and it's going to have content, because in the database we have a content field and a user ID field. Now in the table, this completed item, the default is 0, so we don't need to monkey with that. So content and user ID. So for content, we'll do this input post content, comma. And for the user ID, we'll say this session user data user ID. Okay, so that'll insert it, but we want to make sure it succeeds, so we're going to say if result. We'll do another output, so I'll say this output set output, and we'll do a JSON encode of result of 1. And I'm just going to return false, so nothing here executes. And if it fails, we'll just throw this down here and say result 0. Okay. And we're also going to want to validate the data with a form validator. So let's do a this form validation set rules, and we only need to validate content. So that's the name. Here's the appearance of the error. You just have to do that even though we're not going to be using it. And our rules. So the first rule is going to be required, and let's say a max length of 255. Now when it's required, that means it can't be empty, so there would have to be at least one value in there. So we wouldn't need a min length. And then we'll run the form validator. We'll say if this form validation run is false, we can just copy one of these outputs and paste it here. And let's return false. And we'll say this form validation error array, and we want to pop this guy into the array here. So I'll put these on separate lines, and I'll say error, and I'll cut this guy here. There we go. Okay, now to the JavaScript part. Let's go to our public folder, JS junior dash dashboard, and this is going to be an event. So go to your event and down to create to do. So when create to do is clicked, it's a form. So let's take a look at it. I'll open up the console tool with Control-Shift-I or Control-Shift-C, and with the little inspector I'll look at this, and the action has the URL we want to post to, and the item we want is content, but we'll just serialize the form and that'll get everything in there. It's easier to do that way, in my opinion. So we'll say var URL equals this attribute action, and this refers to the form. Okay, and then var post data equals this serialize. Then we'll say $.post, that's jQuery's post method, URL, post data, and then the callback function O. And the way we access what comes back is with the variable we set in here. And I want this to come back as JSON data, so I'll say comma JSON. And in here I'll say if result, O.result equals 1, else. And if you're wondering where I got this O result, if I go to the API, here's result that's getting outputted in every one of these. But if there's an error, we might as well add one to this one as well, since it's an error. I'll say error, could not insert record. Okay, back here. And what we're going to do is use our result class. So I'll say result.error, and this one will be result.success. I'll get rid of this console log. So let's test it out. I'm going to open my console up again and go to my network tab, and I'll just refresh the page since we have new JavaScript. Looks like I have to re-log in, admin. Okay, so create. And it didn't do what we wanted. It looks like I may have forgot a string. We want to do, let me change this to E. I called all those EVT. So EVT.prevent default. That will prevent the form from doing what it's normally used to doing. Refresh the page, create, network. Let's see. Let's look at the headers. So the form data content is empty, and our response is nothing. So something went a little funny. Let's try typing something in. Test, no response, yet it was okay, and it got the form data posted there. So we do the form validation, and we output this data if it fails, so that should show up. This outputs and this outputs. So it's kind of strange why it's happening. Well, it's actually not strange at all, because I'm in the wrong function here under create note. So I'll just cut this and go to create to do and paste it in here. Okay, and let me try again. Refresh, create, and the response, good. And let's try it just with some letters in there, and it says success. Now we can look at our database, the data, and refresh. Excellent. The user ID and the content is in there. So let me go back. Now what I'm going to want to do is actually improve on the result. So we'll do that in the next video, but that's it for creating. Okay, real quickly, we're going to improve on the result class, and what we want to do is be able to pass messages and things into here. So for error, I want to be able to pass in an array of errors. So what I'll just do is I'll just say message for now. And with success, I want to have a message. Okay. So if we open our event and go to create to do, you see we have our result here. What I want to do is just type in test and error, so that you can do it with me while we test out what happens. Okay. So I'll just duplicate this line, and I'm going to console log message and message, and out of curiosity we'll see what happens. Refresh the page and create, and go to our console, and it says error. Okay, and if we go back, okay, I see it's just calling both of those. So let's try this. If type of message equals undefined console.log error. Let's see what this warning says. Oh, equals. So I'll refresh, create, and that did not get called because we are passing a string in here. So if there's no string, hopefully that calls. So create, there we go. That says undefined, but that does not look correct. So let's go back to result. I'll say undefined, like that. So I'll refresh, create, and undefined. Good. And the reason we did this is so that if they have a undefined item, it'll do something different. So here we can go ahead and copy this for the message as well, and get rid of that and that. So what we want to do is probably write this to the DOM. So we'll go to our views, our dashboard, and how about our header? Okay, and I'll scroll down a little ways, and let's try it in the wrapper. We're going to make an alert from the Twitter Bootstrap. So I'll say div class equals alert, and alert dash, well, they have an error. Okay. That's good. Now the only problem with this is it might appear on the page. So let me refresh. You see how it appears empty? Let's make sure it doesn't do that. In our CSS, we have a style CSS. I'm going to add a class called generic stuff, and I'll say hide will be display none. Okay. And in the header view, I'll just add the class hide. Okay. So if I refresh the page, there it is. And we'll also do an alert for a success. So this will be an alert success. And I'm going to give these IDs so that they're triggered specially. So this will be ID will be error, ID will be success. Okay. Back in our result, we'll say success.html, and we can paste down here and just put in message. And for here, if it's undefined, we'll just have a generic message that says success. Okay. And we'll do the same thing with the error. Error. And this one will say error, if there is none. And that one will have a message. Now this could be a JSON encoded thing, and we'll have to see what we do with it from there. So let's first try it. We're also going to need to show it. So error.show. Well, we could just attach. How about dot fade in? Make it a little interesting. Dot fade in. Okay. And refresh, create, error. Cool. Now to pass data into this error, it'll be pretty easy. We just go to our event, and here it was o.error from our last video. And let's see what happens. Create, and according to our response, we have things in an array. So what we need to do is probably loop that, and let's console log it first to see what we have. So I'll say console.log type of message, and then console log message. It should be a JSON object. So I'll refresh, create, and it's an object. Okay. So I'll say if type of message equals object, we're going to loop through it, else okay. Now we're repeating this a whole bunch and it's kind of ridiculous, so I'm just going to call this var dom equals error. So dom.html, dom.html, and we also want to fade in that top one here. There we go. And to loop this, let's try this. For var key in message, console log key, console log message key. Okay, and we'll see what we get. Refresh, create, there we go. And it looks like we only need the message. So there could be more than one error in many instances. I'm going to put these on separate lines, a little easier to read. We want to build up this message, so I'll say var output equals this, then output plus equals message key. And I think we might want to throw a BR or a list item on there. I think I'll just do a list item, so I'll say UL it up here. Then here we'll say list item, end list item. And for our HTML, we're going to output output instead. So that was a little crazy, huh? So let's refresh, create. It says the content field is required. Oops, sorry about that. So if I zoom in here, it looks like I have what I need. And now we have a better creation class. Now for success, we pretty much don't want to have an object to loop through, so we're not going to do that. I will do the same thing here. I'll say var dom equals success, and I'll say dom fade in and dom.html. Now there's one last thing we're going to want to do. Since this is Ajax driven, those messages will never disappear. So let's set a timeout. We'll just do a plain JavaScript timeout of set timeout, and we'll just put in an anonymous function, and we'll say dom.fadeout, and we need to set a time limit. So I'll say after 5 seconds, and these are microseconds or milliseconds. And we'll do the same down here. Okay. Don't forget our little semicolon. So let's refresh that. Create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fade out. Cool. And that makes us ready with our result class. In this video, we're going to load our records from the database into our application. So let's go to our API, and let's see what we have. Create, delete, update. We need a get. Looks like we didn't create one of those. So I'll just copy this create and paste. And this will be get note. We're also going to want to do that for the to do. And I put that above the create, so I'll put that also above the create. Let's paste another demarcation. Public function get to do. And this will require a login. So let's start with our database query. This db get to do. Now we're actually going to want to do a get where statement, so I'll do it this way. This db where user ID is equal to this session user data user ID. Okay, and this will be our query, and I'll say query result array. I'll call this result, and I'll do a print R of result. Okay, so just make sure you type this out how I did. You can just do result and it'll be objects. In fact, I'll just leave it that way. It doesn't matter to me. And let's go to /API /get to do. Okay. Okay. So we only have one record. Let's create a couple more. I'm just holding Control and pressing Insert to duplicate that. Now for fun, I'm going to give this a user ID of say 16. Now this shouldn't show up in my list if I refresh. Good, now I know I'm only getting my own. However, I'll just create a bunch of them for my user too. So I'll refresh. And to give our application more flexibility, we can optionally pass in an ID. And I'll say if ID does not equal null, we want to get the database stuff where, let's just do, okay, let me delete this. Okay, the where statement will be a lot bigger. So where to do ID equals ID, and we'll want this user ID, and where user ID equals that. Else we'll just do the default where. Okay, so make sure you look at that and you have it typed out the same way, and don't forget your commas and stuff. And I'll go ahead and refresh this, and let's pass /6 or 5. Do I have an ID of 5? Nope. I'll do 6. So if I pass a parameter, I get 1. If I don't pass any, I get them all. We never know, we might want to use that someday. Next, we are going to go to our JavaScript, so I can close API. Views, whoops, public JS junior dash dashboard. And let's see what we have in dashboard. Load to do. So we're going to do a get. And let me see if I actually set some properties in the header that I forgot about. Nope. Okay, so we'll try it this way. Get API /get to do. We want to get them all. And the callback of the function. And I want these in JSON and semicolon. So let's see, I need to output these as JSON. Sorry, we forgot that step. I was just print R-ing them. Get to do. So I'll say this output set output JSON encode result. So there really should never be an error with this because there's always going to be some kind of result. And to make sure, let me refresh this page. There, now we have JSON format. And I'll go back to the dashboard. And what we're going to do is actually load a template. And that's how we're going to build this thing out. The first thing to figure out is open our template. Here's our to-do data, and we're going to pass an object into it. However, let's get the ID by going back a couple steps. Oh, there it is. Do we have it in here? List to do is what we called it. That's where we'll put stuff. Okay. So list to do.html. And I'm going to loop through this data, and to see our data once again, let's just refresh the page and look at the network. How about the XHR tab? Refresh. It looks like it's not getting called, so load to do. See if that works. Looks like I'm going to need a self on it. Self. And at the top we'll add var self, or how about var self equals this to load these private members. Self, refresh. Well, that's strange. Wonder what's not kicking off. Load to do. Okay, and oddly we're having a problem right here with the result. I'm going to comment this out for now, and we can get rid of this self. Okay, so it should just be load to do. Okay, so I'll go ahead and refresh. Go to the network, and here's our little guy. And what I want to do is just pass this object in a loop into our template. So for var I equals 0, I is less than o.length, I plus plus, and the template we want to load is template dot, it doesn't show up in there, to do. Okay, and we're going to pass o I, and I'll say var output equals an empty string, var output, output plus equals template. And for the HTML, we'll do it that way. Let's see how that works. Refresh, and we have all these records here, and this is according to our template. Okay, so we have our ID, our span. Let's go ahead to our template and just this should have to do underscore ID. I'll also add one for the note so we don't forget. Okay, and what we're going to add later is a delete. So I'll say ahref equals nothing and just delete. It's not going to look that good for right now, but I'll refresh. The delete will work soon enough, but that's how we're going to load content into our stuff. Now when we create an item, we don't want to forget this. Look, we have to refresh to actually get it there. We're going to go to our event. Let's actually first copy this template. Let's just copy this chunk here, like so. And event, when they create one, if it's a success, we can delete most of this, but I just wanted two things. Whoops. So var output equals template to do o I think the only thing, I guess we're going to have to pass back some data from our creation so that it'll populate with the ID and all that good stuff. So we'll do that briefly. Looks like we got caught on a rabbit trail, eh? Whoops. And I'm in the wrong file. Oh, I closed it on accident. Where'd it go? Event, and it probably won't be I, in fact. So back in the API, when we create a to-do, if it's successful for the result, we'll say data equals an array, and we'll say content. Heck, we could just select the from the database. I'll say this db get from to do. Whoops, let's just do a get where. where to do ID equals this insert ID. Oops, it has to be this DB insert ID. Okay. Let me make a comment here. Get the freshest entry for the DOM, and we'll say query and result equals query result. So data will be result. Heck, we could just take this and pop it in here. Okay, so when we create, let's make sure that works. So I'll say test, we create, and create to do, and here's our data that we want, and it looks like it's an array with an object. So I'll just say in the event, get this back, I'll say O0 because it's only going to be the first item. And let's do append or prepend so that it goes to the top. Not sure how it's going to work. XXX, and it did not go in. Cannot read property to do ID of undefined. Let's see what it passed back. When we create, there's to do ID. I may have missed a calculated. Oh, I forgot data. O.data 0. There we go. Refresh. 1, 2, 3, and there's 1, 2, 3 at the top. Now if I refresh the page, it's at the bottom, so let's just do append. Okay, so this is your final code right here. You can pause the video and type this out. Now would be a good time. And for dashboard, this is the code. And that's it for this video. In this video, we're going to learn how to delete through Ajax. So first, let's head to our controllers and API, and let's go to delete to do. Okay. And what we're going to do is, we have the to do ID here. It looks like we'll do a this db delete from to do where there we go. To do ID equals this input to do input post to do ID, and we also want to do it where the user ID is the same guy. So user ID equals this session user data user ID. That way nobody can hit up the URL and delete someone else's item. Now for creating them, it only creates items for the guy that's logged in, so that's protected. So I'll call this result. I'll say if result, and I'm getting a little tired of typing this JSON code. I'll just copy this here and back to delete to do. I'll just say result is 1. Otherwise, set output JSON col result is 0, and I suppose we'll throw in a message. We'll say message is since we have that message, well, let's just do a string. Could not delete, and that's good enough. Okay, so in our public, let's go to our JS junior dashboard, and this will start with an event, and we'll go to delete to do, and we need to look at our template at what we have. We have a to do ID, and then we have a delete down here. So I'll call this class equals to do delete, and then I'll just copy that, and we'll say .toDoDelete .live click function EVT prevent default, so it doesn't do the link stuff. And if you're wondering what live does, basically it's the same as click and everything, but when a new element is added to the page, the delete will still have this new listener on it. Okay, so, and let's see what we did. We did a post. Let's actually put the URL in there. So the href would be API/toDoDelete, and then the object ID. Just copy this here and paste. So it looks like that. And we want to get the href, so var URL equals this attribute href. So post to URL, and then the post data, I suppose it's actually not using this, my mistake. Let me take this out. So it goes to API toDoDelete. Let me just do data ID equals object toDoID. Okay, so then we'll say var post data equals this dot attribute data ID. We'll make this an object because you need the post objects. And I'll say toDoID and get rid of that semicolon there. And post data function O, and we'll say if result equals 1, else result dot error O dot message result dot success deleted. And then we're going to want to remove it from the DOM. So I'll say this. Well, we're in the post context, so we're going to want to get it right here. So I'll say var self equals this, and I'll say self dot remove, but that's only going to remove the item there, so we're going to have to go to a parent. So let's go to the parent of the div. This dot parent div. Okay, and this has to be O dot result. Okay, so let's try that out. Refresh, and where's all my good stuff? Let me relog in. Looks like we have an error. No method live. Oh, we're using the latest jQuery, so this will be on a click. It actually might be just on click. Let's try it out. Refresh, delete. Okay. Well, if evt.prevent default, I'll just change that to E because it's confusing me. On click, refresh. So that's not binding properly. There was a little funny change here where sometimes you have to pass in what it is. Let me go back here. So this might have to be the second guy. Click A. Weird thing is that is an anchor, so I'll have to change this. How annoying. A toDoDelete. Let me try that real quick. jQuery 1.9. Okay, so it looks like it's not. A is part of the toDoDelete, so this should just be div since it's inside a div. Kind of weird. Refresh and delete, and we get all these errors. So I'll click this link, open link in new tab. Do I have that URI? API, oh, it's delete to do, not to do delete. So templates, over at the end here, this will be delete to do. Let's refresh and delete. Error. Okay, delete. Well, at least it's working. Curiously, I don't know what the error is. So that would be under the API. It is posting the to-do ID, so let's make sure that's getting posted. If I scroll up, let's go to the headers and the form data. To-do ID is getting posted. Okay. And just for fun, let's say I delete this and there's an error and I refresh the page, it's gone. So our error reporting looks like it's not correct. So if result of a delete is successful, it returns 1. Otherwise it says could not delete. Well, that's curious. I believe we need to do this DB affected rows. Okay. So if DB affected rows is greater than 0, return 1. Let's see if that works. Delete. Error. Could not delete. That's strange. Echo DB affected rows. Let's see what that gives us. Refresh. Delete. 0 affected rows. So is our delete even working? Delete to do inside an array where the to do ID and the user ID so it's time to debug. We'll do a print R of that array, comment that guy out and see what happens. Delete. And we have user ID is 1, to do ID is 14. If I look in here, it's right there. I'm thinking it might be due to the foreign key restraints. Foreign keys on delete shouldn't do anything. What's the user has no foreign keys. On update, I'll just change that to no action. And note, I'll change that to no action. Let's try to delete it straight from MySql. Delete from to do where to do ID equals 15. 1 row affected. 15's gone. So I'll just put this back to how it was. Okay, and this doesn't need a result because the affected rows. So if I refresh, I try to delete, I get, wow, that gets called a lot. I think I see what the problem is. It's getting called over and over. When I click it once, it gets called all these times. And we had a successful result. Strange behavior. Okay, so affected rows is working. It's the event. Div on click. That's because this on click is targeting everything. This really should work with this here. On click. To do delete, refresh, delete. Add a couple of these in there. Okay. And my post date is all good, but this is not triggering how I want. Let me check my jQuery version. 1.9.1. I've had problems with this before. Alright, I'm just going to do this body and then we'll just click it like that with there. Okay. That's kind of annoying, but I don't know what else to do. Refresh and delete, and it says an error. Delete, result is 1, result is 1. So it shouldn't be an error. Looks like we're returning the wrong thing. Result is 1 when we delete. So if result equals 1, result success, else. Having bad luck today. So why is this error getting triggered? O.result right here. We've done this before. We're returning the right thing. Result of 1. O.result console.log o. Refresh console, and let's see, when we delete we get, I forgot to pass the JSON. That's why. Alright, now we got it working. Delete, delete, delete. Well, these are all named the same thing. Let me do ABC 1 2 3 pig dog. Okay, so delete, 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 refresh, and it saves it. There, we finally got it, guys. Well, this wasn't as comprehensive and straightforward as I wanted it to be, but I'm going to keep this video here because I feel like it's good debugging practice. Thanks for watching. Okay guys, with our application we have a delete ability, and what we want to do is make it so we can check it off if it's completed. And to do that, let's start with opening NetBeans and going to the API controller. And on the list, let's look for update to do. And it's already posting a to-do ID, or at least it's set up. I'm going to duplicate that line with Control-Shift down, and I'm going to call this completed. And we're going to post whether it's completed. So we'll say this db where, and in here I'll say we make an array to do ID equals to do ID, and then this db update, and in here we'll say completed equals completed. Okay, and let's say this db affected rows, and I'm going to search for that because I often get this wrong. Yep, that's it. So back to the update to do, and we're going to return the output. So I'll just copy one of these and paste. So I'll say result equals how many affected rows, and we'll say if result return false, otherwise nothing was updated, return false. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead to our public JS junior dash dashboard and our template, and let's look for the to-do object right here, and I'm going to make a little thing on here that says complete. So I'll just say output plus equals ahref goes to nowhere right now, and I'll just say complete. And what we have to do is we have to pass the ID, so I'll say data ID equals object dot to do ID. Now we could get the ID from the parent here through jQuery, but I'm going to keep it in the link. And then what we also want is the completed status, and I'll say data completed equals plus plus. Actually, I'll just put a 1 in here for now. Okay. So let me close this little navigator, and I'll go ahead and refresh the page to make sure it appears correctly. Okay, and those are kind of close together. It doesn't look too pretty. We'll fix it up later. And let's give this a class. So I'll say class equals to-do delete. Next, we're going to get to-do delete triggered in our events. So update to-do is what we're going to look for. I kind of want my navigator open again. And I'll go to update to-do. And this is triggered when .to-do delete is clicked. Oops. On click to-do delete function E. I need to change this just to body because previously we had some problems with that. And I'll say prevent default. And I'm going to say this dot attribute data dash completed, and this dot attribute data slash ID. Okay. And what we're going to do is say var post data equals an object, and we'll just wrap these two in here. Get rid of the semicolons. And for this I'll say ID and completed. Okay. Then we do a JSON post dot post. We're going to need a URL, but I'll get to that. So we'll say post data, the function of O, and we'll pass this as JSON. So for the URL, let me check if we have it in the template. Okay, so for the href we could just put it in here so it's consistent with everything else. So I'll say API slash update to do. Okay, and var URL equals this dot attribute href. Okay, and let's see what we did for our other ones. O.result. So if O.result equals 1, else result.error, nothing updated. And if it's a success, we'll just say save. Okay, so now is a good time to check if it actually worked. So I'll open up my console with Control-Shift-C and my network tab, refresh. Well, actually it should give us a result, so I'll click complete. And let's see, update to do problem. You must use the set method to update an entry. So I had something wrong with my query. So go back to api.php. It looks like I didn't give it a table name. So I'll put to do. And try again. Complete. It says error. Result 0. So nothing updated. And if we look in our database, I'll refresh, completed is 0. So let's investigate the headers and see what we posted. So we posted to do ID of 33, but completed did not get posted, it looks like. So I'll take my little magnifier and inspect this. Data dash completed equals 1. Let's make sure we're getting that in the event.js. Data dash completed. Little debugging time. Console.log post data. Let's see what that gives us. Refresh, and in the console, complete. And we are passing this. And in our network tab, form data is still showing to do ID only, which is really strange. So Let's go a little bit further and do some debugging. And I will echo out completed. And I'll also echo out to-do ID. And I'll echo out a /n for a new line. But I don't think that's going to appear in the console. So completed, and go to network, update to-do, and the response 33. So somewhere it's not getting passed, and it's something obvious I'm missing. So inside the event, I'll try passing a string like that, and as I recall, this was supposed to be to-do ID. And for debug's sake, let's see if that does anything. Network, update. It's still getting the to-do ID, but I'm a little bit perplexed why completed isn't showing. Yet it is posting here. You see post data, and we're posting post data, which is very curious. So let's test it a little more. Let's say test equals 1. And I'm just going to do a print R of post to see what we get. And I'll go ahead and refresh the page and complete. Update to do, and it has the to do ID. Okay, so now I know I'm doing something wrong because I'm passing in all of this stuff. Okay, so I paused the video for a moment. It looks like I'm making a very amateur mistake. This needs to be to do update. So I'll go ahead and try that. Refresh, complete, and yet it's still posting it. Let's see what the class name is this. Oh, I gave it the wrong class name too. To do update inside of our template. It's always the little things. Complete, network. There we go. Now it's posting both of them. Well, the good news is you're learning some tricks to debug, because I promise you will use them. Okay? So if that's completed, what we need to do is have a completed status. So let's see, we have a div ID of a to-do, and what we can do is add a class to this. So we'll go to CSS, style.css. Let's make something called to-do complete. And we'll say color will be, let me find a nice color. Is there a gray in here? B3, B3, B3. Okay. So I'll close out that, and I want to go to the parent of this div and add that class. So in this event, if it is successful, I'll say var self equals this, and I'm doing this so that I can access it inside the post. See, in this function, it's considered this right here. In this function, this would relate to the post. So I'll say self.parents div dot add class to do complete, and let's see if that works. Complete, and that worked, but it looked like it grabbed everyone above it. What if I just did parent self parent complete, and there we go, it comments that one out. Next thing we'll want to do is, if it is complete, we want to keep it undone like that. So here what we're going to do is, if obj.completed equals 1, else, and let's cut this here, and we'll paste it there. And if it is completed, we'll just add a class of to-do complete. And I'll go ahead and refresh. So they're all complete right now. We just want to incomplete button too. So what I'll do is this. I'm going to duplicate this line here. This is called to-do update. I am going to change it to to-do complete, to-do uncomplete. Okay. And the value for this will be 0. Okay. So I got to change a couple DOM elements. This one to do complete, and let me cut this guy out. Actually, in fact, we could just leave this to do update, and what we want to do is just change the value around. I think that's the smartest way to do it, like that. Just leave it how it was. And what I'll do is this. If it's a success, then I'll say self.html, let's do uncomplete. And then we need to do self.attribute data completed is 1 or 0, sorry. So let's try that. Right now they're all completed, which is a problem. And we need to change the template as well again. So right here, if we could just copy this line right here, if the object is completed. Okay, we're just pasting this in here like we did above. Okay, exact same thing, except this will be a 0. Basically the opposite of what it should be. So if it's completed, this will be a 0 and this will be a 1. And this one will say incomplete. And back to the page, refresh, and incomplete. I'll have to refresh the page. Incomplete, complete. Okay, so the only other thing is when we click incomplete, it needs to remove the class. So it's a little bit tricky. So in events, let's see, we'll say if post data dot completed equals 1, we'll add the class of to do complete, and then we want to change the attributes. Else, we'll just copy this chunk. We'll say remove class to do complete and change this to complete and this to 1. Basically the opposite. Okay, and we can take these quotes off of these here. That was for debugging. Okay, so I'll go ahead and refresh. Incomplete, complete, incomplete. And always want to check the database, make sure everything looks good. So none are completed. And if we complete 3 of them, should have 3 records in here. Cool. The reason this doesn't show up is because it's for another user ID. Let me go back to the template. Now this code's quite a bit scary, so what we can do to clean this up is actually just use one output for it, but we'll set a variable. And what I'll say is this: var data completed equals, and we're going to do a ternary operator, and I'll say obj.completed equals 1. So if the object is completed, we want our template to show us the ability to incomplete. So we'll do 0 and 1. And then we're just going to pass this variable right here. Data completed. Okay. And let me refresh to make sure it works. Complete. Incomplete. Looks like we got it backwards. Complete. That's right. But if I refresh, it's still showing complete. So I didn't change the text. I believe that's the problem. So I'll make another variable called text. This will be incomplete, and this will be complete. And we'll take this variable and we'll paste them right in here, like that. Let me close this so you can see it better. So this is a little busy, and there's a lot of room for improvement. Okay, incomplete, complete, complete, complete. Refresh. It looks like these have it the other way around. Incomplete, incomplete, incomplete. No, that looks right. Okay, cool. Before we close this video up, I want to show you Bootstrap, one little thing. So here's Bootstrap, and what we're going to do is go to Components, looks like Base CSS, and Icons by Glyph Icons. And these are really easy to use. So look for icon remove. That'll be good for our delete. So I'll just copy that text, and for my delete icon in the template, instead of the word delete, I'll have iClass equals icon remove. Okay. And for the complete, let's see. This one's a little tricky because that looks like a delete icon, and find something we like. I like this icon edit. So I'll take icon edit, and for complete we will use iClass equals icon edit, and to uncomplete looks like is there an undo anywhere? I'll just do a find for undo. Nope. Let me go back up. This share looks pretty good for an undo icon. I do wish it was going in the other direction, but no big deal. So we'll go here, and for incomplete we'll say iClass equals icon share alt. And let's see our events. Yep, we're going to have to add here. So iClass equals icon share alt, and the name for our other one was icon edit. You could put whatever you like here. So I'll go ahead and refresh, and this would be to complete it, this would be to undo it. I think I'm going to change that to check because that's dog ugly, so icon OK. So instead of icon edit, I'll say OK here, and in the template we'll say OK there, and click the two disks to save all files. Refresh, undo, boom, 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 boom. And we don't need this annoying thing at the top for this, so I'm going to go ahead and release this from the result if it's a success. So refresh, good, good, undo, undo, delete. Okay, looks good.